Augies Worldwide. I'm Dave Casler, amateur radio call sign KE0OG, here with another episode of Ask Dave. Today's question comes from Todd Thus, K4XG, and he lives out in Alabama. Okay, let's take a look at his question. It's kind of interesting here, and I get this question a lot, where your station ground is way away from where your utility ground is. I want to talk to you a little bit of a thing that you can do about that. My antenna feed line, lightning arrestor, and tower are bonded to a single point ground rod right below where they enter the house. Good. My radios and equipment are bonded to a single point on a metal desk I operate at. Ooh, we've got a separation between the wires coming in and the metal desk. Okay. How should the desk be bonded to the single point ground outside the house? It appears impossible to avoid a multipoint ground in this situation. The house's ground rod is a long distance away from the antenna ground rod. So that's his utility ground is far away from his antenna ground. The house's ground rod is too far from the station and antennas to be feasible to connect to. Let's take a look at this. First of all, as usual, best practices for amateur grounding are found in this book, which is Grounding and Bonding for the Radio Amateur, 2nd edition. Okay, and you can get this from the ARRL or online. And I want to show you a particular picture here. The dotted lines are the building's exterior. Okay, you've got your AC service entry, and right here is the service entrance ground. Okay, now this shows the single point grounding panel. I have one that is actually a panel. You can get the equivalent of this by mounting everything on your station ground rod. So what you have for your equipment here is an RF bonding bus, okay, and it comes in here, and this is where the lightning arresters are, or if you don't have this, go down to here where the lightning arresters are. There is a wire that comes here to bond these two together. These are your antenna cables and stuff like that. Now, ideally, you would run a perimeter ground, although that's very difficult for people to do. At a minimum, run these two to each other. Now, notice what he shows up here as part of the perimeter ground. About twice or so the length of the ground, in other words, every 16 feet-ish, you would put in a ground rod along this, which is all buried, not very far, only a few inches. I would use bare wire, number 6, and I would recommend stranded because it has a greater surface area to carry heavy current, okay? So between here and here, if this is too far, you can put extra ground rods in there. So you've got a ground rod about every 16 feet-ish or so that's grounded. This wire should be buried so that it kind of acts like an additional ground. All I'll say about that is it will boost the ground. Now note the AC safety ground, okay, comes into the single point ground panel 2, okay, and then here's all your antenna cables that come out through here or just come out over here if you're using your ground rod for that. Notice the tower grounding system and how it's connected. You connect it to which of these two is closest, okay, very often that's over here. Now here's the problem that you've got. You've got your antenna and stuff like that coming in here, and then you're grounding to a great big chunk of metal, which is your metal desk. That metal desk needs to be grounded to the single point ground. This is the station single point ground right here, okay? And just a cable coming down here. I recommend against grounding to that table. You can if you want to, because being metal, it will follow whatever voltage is here, all right? There can be a voltage differential between here because of the inductance involved in the cables during a nearby lightning strike. Again, a direct strike, all bets are off. I've had a direct strike. I know what it can do. This right here is your main diagram, and it'll talk about what to do. Now, what I do is I bond all my equipment to about 1.5 foot long piece of copper pipe. And then I have number 2 stranded insulated going out to the single point ground panel. Okay, and then that is grounded to its own ground rod. Actually, there's 2 ground rods fairly near to each other. Okay, and then I have a bond over AC service entrance. This is the utility ground over here. Now you can mount in here, if you've got the room, some surge protectors and stuff like that. In any event, the idea is in the event of a nearby lightning strike, it'll raise the voltage of everything in the house together. This is why you want your table or whatever your grounding bus is to the ground here, so that all of your equipment goes up and down with the same ground as is brought is from the antenna cables, okay? It is not the voltage that breaks things. It is the voltage difference that breaks things. Now, there's always going to be a little inductance in here and all that. That's why we go for the thick wires. You reduce the resistance. I know resistance and inductance are two separate things, but this book, this is just one summary diagram in the whole book, which is quite thick and has a good index in here, okay? And there are other key features in here, like how to install ground rods, what to do if there's not enough room before you hit the rock layer, and so on and so forth. They would like to have the tops of them buried, although you could do it like this if you want to put a little flower pot around it so you can get to it that way. Anyway, it talks about ground conductors, sizes, so on and so forth. Okay, there you go. So the key point is that we don't have multiple ground things that can operate against each other. The grounds on your equipment, power supply ground, the equipment ground, and so on, are to be connected to the outside ground. Okay, and then you bond that to the other. For most nearby lightning strikes, that should take care of it. Again, in the event of a direct strike, all bets are off. Okay, but don't let that desk float compared to your RF ground. If you connect that to the house ground, you've got this big long path back to the electrical box and then back over here. But ground your equipment using as short a run as possible outside to the single point grounding panel. This is an example of a single point grounding panel. You see here the big sheet of copper that everything is hooked to, all your lightning arresters, so on and so forth. You could put 2 rows in, whatever you would like to do, and then it goes out through these little rubber grommets so you don't get mice inside. But this is the kind of thing that we're talking about, the single point ground panel. KF7E makes all kinds of them here, all kinds of different things that you can do. I have one that's very similar to this, where you've got double stacked. See, these are double stacked, 2 lightning arresters, one on top of the other. You can also get them in fiberglass for the outer cable. He's got all kinds of things for grounding in here. This is KF7P.com. He is also the principal behind the Morgan lightning arresters. If you prefer alpha, delta, or polyphaser, you can order it with those too. If you have a single point ground rod and you want to connect your lightning arrestor to that, you can connect directly. I'd get the alpha delta, they're waterproof. You can do that too. Lightning arresters, the alpha delta, are in the neighborhood of $100. The ground rod, of course, you can get down at Home Depot or Lowe's or your local Ace or True Value hardware store or whatever you have near you. You want 8 foot. They are all copper clad steel. Okay, so they aren't terribly expensive. I'm going to say on the order of $20. Now, driving a ground rod into the ground can be an issue. If you are having trouble, you could pay an electrician, which I did to install my panel here, or you can get ground rod drivers. If you try hammering it with a sledgehammer at the top, it can work. I've driven many ground rods that way, but it's a great way to bend the ground rod. So anyway, there you go. I hope that helps with your question. Yes, you need to bond your single point ground rod for your station to the utility ground. And if the run is over about 16 feet, you're going to want to put in intermediate ground rods along that run. And then that will work really well. Make sure that your tower ground rod comes in and attaches usually at your single point ground panel, but it could be. It's shown in the book as at the utility ground panel. Now, all my antennas are out back. My station single point ground is just on the other side of that wall, and the utility ground is just down at the end of the wall. And the electrician was most helpful. I wanted to put the thing in, and I really did not feel confident in myself putting a hole in the side of the wall and getting it properly sealed and all that sort of thing. That's why I hired an electrician to do that. And then I put in all the cables and attach them to the pre-installed lightning arresters. Think of this as an investment in safety. It's going to last you many, many, many years. The thing that concerns me is that your antennas and radios are not bonded together. That's where we need to get that ground bonding. I use, like I said, number 2 stranded wire. It is insulated and it goes right out to that panel. Okay, so that all my equipment is at the same potential as the ground rod out there. So if there is a lightning strike, it brings everything up to the same potential. If there's a direct lightning strike, again, I've had one of those, all bets are off. That particular lightning strike destroyed our garage door opener, of all things. It destroyed the Hayes smart modem I had in my computer, and it caused an arc over in an MFJ antenna tuner that I used, and fortunately the rig was completely detached from everything. The rig had no issues. My power supply, it was an analog power supply, transformer-based power supply. It blew out the chip. The chip was a whole buck to replace. Not bad, but it also absolutely vaporized the wire that I had in place to drain the static charge off of the antenna. So there you have it. Okay, so yes, think of grounding as an investment in the future and in your own safety. Get that book, this book right here. Make sure it's the 2nd edition, okay? What happens is they put out a 1st edition, and a guy who knows a great deal about grounding, has the licenses and everything like that, contacted Ward Silver, and they did a pretty thorough revamp of that book. So that currently constitutes amateur best practices for your grounding. So there you have it. Until we next meet, 73.